If you haven't been in the loop, Feral Druids did receive a buff that was a hotfix, so it went live instantly. That greatly increased their DPS for most players, but also scaled really well in ICC, showing most simulations currently having Feral Druids being the literal #1 single target DPS class in the entire game in ICC BIS. Now, we're not looking to talk about that necessarily today, and I do have videos on my channel about that, but the things we're going to talk about is Blizzard is now implementing these changes, or has been, instantly on the fly, not throwing them through tester, not letting anybody know, but there's been changes that are happening on the fly. And if you missed it yesterday, they did another nerf actually to Feral Druids, where they made them lose 5% of their total damage, just statically by nerfing the talent Naturalist. As you can see, this talent gives 10% physical damage. Well, Blizzard Ninja nerfed it yesterday on Live Realms, and people noticed without any blue posts that it was giving 5% physical damage, which is all of the Feral Druids damage. This is a huge hit to Feral Druids, and it made them kind of weak, obviously. Still actually stronger than the buff, but then yesterday, after outcries from the community, which this is probably gonna be the biggest thing to talk about, is that they reversed that change once again. Snip, snap, snip, snap. Blizzard was kind of making a whoopsie and realized that they made a whoopsie, and people were pissed about it. And I think even though they've realized what's going on, this is a bigger potential issue than we could foresee. So let's break that all down today. Also, finally, we might have some fixes to actual bugs in the game, not just classes not being as strong as they should, but bugs like Ignite Munching and Deep Wounds and things like that. So we got a response from Agran saying that I think it's fair to ask for some clarification on these adjustments. So he's admitting that we did deserve them to come out and talk about what was going on. So originally, the changes to Feral Druid were that they could no longer have to shift into bear form in the middle of their rotation. It was basically to curb and get rid of bear weaving, which, as you can see, the reason for that would be whenever you're out of energy, you can actually go into bear form and still regain all of that energy. Now, bear with me, I'm just working on these weak auras. I just started on them, so they look ugly, but it's just for the sake of showing you guys what it looks like. If you use all of your energy, again, you're in cat form, and boom, now you can't attack at all. Go into bear form, and you are attacking while regaining that energy. The real thing here is, like rogues know, you have to pool energy. If you have too much of it, then you use your abilities, but if you waste all of it, you can't use any abilities. Blizzard wanted to get rid of this, so what they did was make it so Feral Fairy Fire actually procs Omen of Clarity, which is a clear casting, making your next ability free. Free mangle, free swipe. They also got rid of flower shifting, which was when you were actually using your buffs, just buffing people in the raid, which you would use Gift of the Wild, and then you would get Omen of Clarity and go back into DPSing. But apparently that's back in the game, so be aware of that. They did just get rebuffed a little bit more after this nerf. Another thing they did get rebuffed is that Bear Druids are actually having more threat now. I haven't seen official notes on this, just heard all reports, so bear with me on that one. Anyways, after making these changes and then deciding it was too strong of a buff, which it realistically probably is, but most people, if you notice, your Feral Druid was doing significantly more DPS. Ferals have been pumping without bear weaving, and the reason why you saw a massive change in your Feral is probably because they weren't doing their rotation perfectly. To be honest, the bear weaving rotation wasn't the easiest one to do, and a lot of people just forgoed doing it. They were doing their normal rotation and missing out on a ton of damage because they weren't going into bear form. So now they are getting just a ton more than just a 5 to 10% boost. They're getting a significant boost in their damage because they no longer have to miss out on just not optimally doing their rotation. So what they tried to do was revert that and nerf the Naturalist talent, take away 5% of their damage. And then what they did was revert that after people got upset. And this is where the big issue is. If players can be upset about their class not performing good enough or other classes performing much better than them, and Blizzard actually will go in and then change the game, when it's not necessarily a change to a bug, that's where I think we lose a bit of the magic of Classic, and that's where I think we're in a dangerous territory. Because we all know, if you looked anywhere online after these feral changes, there was a lot of people complaining, if you're gonna buff them, why not buff me? Ret Paladins got their buffs, and everybody was complaining, if you're gonna buff them, why not me? These Feral Druid changes kind of made it a lot less likely for you to need a lot of Fury Warriors in ICC, and it's been a lot of an uproar about Fury Warriors trying to say, just wait until I have Shadowmourne, but Feral Druid's kind of pumping like crazy in ICC now. So that caused a huge uproar there, and Blizzard retracted their notions. Now, I think this is data driven, to be honest. Seeing a lot of the simulations, seeing a lot of the numbers, seeing how this change that they had made scales and impacts the game, which is why they are really going to change things moving forward in the future. That being said, Agrand says that going forward, they realize they have some issues, but they need to test all changes on the PTR first before actually just implementing them live. And I think this one and the Ret one were like the first ones we've ever really seen changes just go live right away. Blizzard has also semi-pledged to communicate better the intent around these changes, especially when there's such significant changes. And that leads me to the classes that are actually broken and not performing the way they should. And that's kind of one of the biggest issues as well, because these ones haven't been addressed yet. One of them is Ignite Munching, which is, as you can see from this beautiful man criteria right behind me, so massive shout out to Krat. Ignite Munching is a interaction in the game where if you hit with a Pyroblast and another spell at the exact same time, like those two just did right there, you won't get the buffs from both of them. Basically, you have Ignite, which gives you a percentage of that damage should be applied onto a dot. Now, right now in the game, you have to literally delay your own abilities through a macro and some weak auras so that they don't hit at the same time, or else you don't get both of those damages applied to the dot. I'm not the best at explaining it, but I hope that was clear enough. Warriors have the same issue with deep wounds. If they hit with 2 crits at the same time, which especially happens if you have the same speed weapons, then you're not having both of those abilities applied to deep wounds. This was not as large of an issue because warriors weren't doing as large of an amount of damage, but that issue scales as you get stronger with ICC and weapons like Shadowmourne, of course. Now, Blizzard wasn't talking about this for a long time, but they did finally announce that one, we should keep an eye out on the PTR because Trial of the Crusader test and Phase 3 test should be relatively soon. They said in the next few weeks. And then the next one is that they're finally looking into Deep Wounds and Ignite Munching, which is a very authentic way of the game playing back in Wrath of the Lich King, but they have to literally change the fundamentals of the way the spells work. And that may cause other issues. We'll have to wait and see if it will end up causing some other issues within the game. Now, for reference, one of the issues I even saw today in our speed runs right after we got a brand new world record was on Yogg-Saron Phase 1. Sarah never phased. Look at the HP of the boss at 1%. This boss literally never phases out of 1%, and eventually, after a few minutes, we just had to wipe it up and go again. Now, past that, there are other issues within the game that are still prevalent today. One of them that is a huge one that most people love to talk about, but hasn't been dealt with particularly, are hunter traps. The way hunter traps work right now is they need to be directly underneath the boss's middle bit of its hitbox, not touching the hitbox, but directly underneath the middle of the boss, or else the traps won't trigger. This is something that was Wrath-like because it is actually referenced and it worked that way back in Wrath of the Lich King, but that's another thing that if you're looking to make quality of life changes, it would be another one that's relatively easy to deal with. Then comes something even crazier, and most of you guys probably have no idea about this, and I'll make a video soon, but the most bugged spell ability in the entirety of Wrath of the Lich King right now is actually dancing rune weapon. And I know so many people are like, why do you care? Who cares about blood decays? But this actual ability has 5 or 6 bugs in it right now that, if it worked properly, would apparently, according to simulations, mean that blood decay DPS would be the highest single target DPS spec for DKs in ICC. I'm not even memeing, and I know a lot of people are going to be kind of upset or say who cares, but this would actually be a spec that would be more DPS than anything else, better than Unholy, better than Frost on single target, and it'd be a competitive spec next phase, and the highest DPS spec in some cleave fights next phase if it was fixed. It's an actual ability that isn't even acting at all the way it should, and it's not even doing any bits of the damage that it should, which is kind of crazy, and I'll have numbers for you when I make a video about that. Anyways, guys, that's all of the details, all the information. I hope to see you all rolling Feral, and we might have some Feral guides on the channel soon, but if you want some really good ones, check out my boy Grifton Wow over on YouTube. Peace, guys, and I'll catch you all on the next one.